Find your purpose, your calling, your destiny, preferably yesterday, and preferably with the kind of passion that makes it hard for you to shut up about it. Hi, I'm Kate Bowler, and I'm a writer, a Duke professor, and a podcaster. And I study the stories we tell about ourselves and our suffering, our success, and what makes life meaningful. Beneath these compelling directives lies a troubling truth. The cultural obsession with a singular, all-encompassing life purpose often breeds more anxiety than clarity. Speaking of meaning, do you know yours? The myth of a singular purpose found a particularly potent expression in a book published in 2002 by Rick Warren. It was called The Purpose-Driven Life. Yes, you've probably seen this book in your parents' bookshelf or every small free library, which means, yeah, don't pay full price for that book ever. And it's probably because it sold over 50 million copies and became a global phenomenon by tapping into this widespread hunger for direction and meaning. Its five-part framework, worship, fellowship, discipleship, ministry, and mission, provided a spiritual map for the purpose-seeking Christian. And to its credit, it offered all kinds of structure to that formless ache for significance that so many of us carry. But now let's talk about how even a good purpose can go wrong. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to live. You had to live purposefully. The language of purpose became a kind of secular gospel, echoed by TED Talks, graduation speeches, and startup manifestos. Suddenly, it wasn't just faith communities asking, what on earth am I put here for? But suddenly it was entrepreneurs and self-help influencers and everyday hustlers, all convinced that they needed to express in their lives a singular world-changing mission. Suddenly, purpose had to have impact and scale. It had to justify every job, every hobby, even every moment of rest. Isn't it enough to have a job, you might ask? No, apparently it is not. Now, historically, work has been viewed as a means of survival or social contribution. But the rise of a purpose-driven ethos blurred the lines between employment and identity, especially among younger generations. So it's now the prevailing expectation, Gen Z, that your job has to reflect a deeper calling. Paid labor has now taken on the existential weight once reserved for religious vocation. But most jobs, for most people, were never designed to bear that burden. Jobs are just jobs, or at least they used to be. In this cultural climate, failing to find your one magical thing can start to feel like a moral failure. And that search for clarity morphs into an experience of confusion or even shame. People start to wonder, am I missing something? Am I not passionate enough, focused enough, brave enough to find my true calling? Complicating this further is the erosion of unpaid purpose-giving structures. So in the decades following World War II, civic and religious life was typically where people went to have long-term volunteerism and community service, places where people could meaningfully connect outside of the economy of labor. But as fewer people engage in these traditional forms of service, the pressure for paid work to supply all of life's meaning just intensified. And this context makes the myth of singular purpose not just unrealistic, but completely unsustainable. It's a myth that burdens the ordinary. It recasts rest as laziness, and it turns spiritual searching into some kind of productivity metric. The myth of the singular purpose, then, deserves a critical reexamination, not to dismiss the value of calling, but to decenter it as the only or highest form of meaning. Most of life, after all, is not grand or spectacular. It's found in caregiving, errands, quiet integrity, or just being in your carpool line. What if meaning emerged not through a predetermined life plan, but through responsiveness, through the humble daily acts of care, of service, of creativity, of connection that accumulate across a lifetime? We don't want to negate the idea that life is meaningful, but history shows us that meaning is often discovered in hindsight, not through a predetermined plan. So I want to challenge the assumption that meaning always has to be conscious, strategic, and goal-oriented. Ironically, in our quest for purpose, we may have lost sight of the quieter, cumulative forms of meaning-making found in ordinary routines and relationships and just tiny moments. So maybe it's time to make peace with the limits of our meaning-making, to stop demanding that every act, every season, every job, every hobby, every New Year's has to be redeemed by some higher purpose. Sometimes we just find meaning and it's wonderful. What grace. But lots of times we just fumble around in the dark, hoping that small acts of faithfulness will add up to something too. So may it be enough to say, this moment mattered to me. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to subscribe, share, drop a comment. I'd love to hear from you.